So good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to say thank you for coming to the second of our town halls in regards to Bill 8. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is just to receive feedback from the citizens of Harrisburg about Bill 8 2020, which would establish a Citizens Advisory Committee known as the Citizens Law Enforcement Advisory Committee. The committee would be made up of 7 members. The initial appointment of the members will be appointed by City Council and the mayor. And then once the initial terms expire, the committee would recommend replacements for the vacant positions. Other than the 7 members, the committee would also have 2 non-voting members, which would be the chief of police and the public safety chair from City Council. Qualifications for the members: all members would have to have resided in the city of Harrisburg for at least 3 years before their appointment to the committee. Members must participate in an annual ride-along and attend an orientation or the Citizens Police Academy. Each of the members, we'd have representation from at least all of our policing districts. So each member would represent one of the policing districts. Trying to think of some of the other qualifications. And at least two of the members would have to have recent training and experience in social service, human services, and be a licensed social worker. The committee itself would provide information gathering and one or more of the following categories: officer and supervisor training and education program options, the Harrisburg Bureau of Police published general orders and related policies, reports on law enforcement interactions with the public, citizens' complaints and summaries and reports, or similar categories. Tonight, we're just here to get feedback on Bill 8. Some of the things we've heard in the past include that a lot of citizens would like for the board to have more teeth and have subpoena powers. Last week, we heard some comments asking that the members of the board not be required to do the annual ride along or have an orientation by the police department, and also some concerns about the chief of police sitting on the board. So those are just some of the comments we've heard in the recent past as we've been doing some of these public engagements. We will have another one of these town halls next week. It will be in person at Reservoir Park from 6 to 8. So tonight we're going to open it up for public comments. Tonight's format is similar to last week's format, but a little different. So if you're calling in, you can dial *9 in order to raise your hand and be unmuted. Or if you are participating via Zoom, you can push the raise your hand feature or type in the Q&A in order to make a public comment and have yourself unmuted. So if my colleagues have any comments they'd like to make before we open it up to the public, please feel free to make your comments. If not, we'll go ahead and open up to the public and start gathering some public comments. All right, so we'll open up to the public. If anyone has a comment, please raise your hand or type it in the Q&A or press *9 if you've dialed in order to have yourself unmuted. So we'll give people a little bit of time in order to get into the call and get any questions they have so that they can be unmuted and make their comments. Last week, we had pretty good attendance. We had a lot of people that phoned in and gave their comments. This week, we opened it up to be able to click in directly through Zoom. So you can press the raise the hand feature, or you could type directly into the Q&A if you would prefer to type your comment instead of verbalizing your comment. Or you can dial *9 in order to have yourself unmuted. Someone just put in the Q&A, they just would like to say thank you for this feature and that they really appreciate it. This was just in response to some of the comments last week of being able to access the comments easier, to be able to type your comments or be able to verbalize your comments. So if you have any questions or comments regarding Bill 8, please feel free to press *9 if you've dialed in, or push the raise your hand feature if you've clicked in via Zoom, or type it directly in the Q&A.
It looks like Wes is in the queue.
I do. It looks like Wes clicked in through the public.
Right, I'm trying to coordinate with him now.
All right, looks like he's in now.
Okay, we're good, okay.
Hey, my apologies. I was having some IT issues with my harrisburgpa.gov email address that Steve is working out. So
No worries.
All right.
I saw you hanging out in there too. I'm like, Wes is there, bring him in.
So far, we don't have any questions. If anyone has a question, feel free to type it into the Q&A. If you'd like to write it, if you'd like to verbalize it, please press *9 if you're dialed in, or press the raise hand feature through Zoom in order to raise your hand. Looks like we have one question. State your name and the area in the city where you live, and give us your question.
Hi, this is Liam Hicklin. I live in the Midtown area of Harrisburg. I was calling, well, one thing I wanted to clear up was at the last town hall, we had talked about some of the roadblocks or obstacles to some of the powers that we would like to see implemented or incorporated in the board, Civilian Review Board. And there was an article in Penn Live about it that was essentially taking the solicitor's word for it that that residents want certain things, but they're not allowed by law. I don't think that that's been proven. And I got a little confused too, because I was looking through the legislature. I saw that Erie, Pennsylvania, which is also a third-class city, is going through the step motions to implement a civilian review board. And they're asking for many of the things that we're asking for in ours. The difference being that the city council and the mayor consulted with an outside lawyer who had worked with the review board in New York City. And they're looking at what steps they need to take to implement some of these things we're looking for, like subpoena power and independent investigatory power, the right to review police records and compile data about any types of complaints that are against police officers. So I wondered if the city council is committed to looking at legislature, looking at what we're asking for, and publicly, if there are actual obstacles, publicly posting where we can find that information, or at least investigating these things that we're asking for, and seeing if there are actual legal obstacles or if it's just a way to keep residents from asking for these things.
I think your question is, will council commit to investigating the things that the citizens are asking for and see the legality of them?
Correct.
And if there's a way for us to get those powers.
Yeah. And also making public the results of the investigation and the legislation that's tied to.
Okay. I can say that I will be willing to look into what the citizens are asking for. That's the purpose of having these town hall meetings, is to find out what's being asked for, find out if it's something we can do. If not, make everyone aware of what roadblocks we have in the process, and to get the most effective legislation that we have the capability of doing in our power. So I can say that we're committed to that. Or at least, and I believe
I
it's
just want to add to Councilmember Green too, that I think I certainly also want to understand all of the angles, all the legal interpretations that are out there, and make sure that we are, proceeding accordingly with that, with certainly taking into mind all the discussions that have been had around the community when it comes to, what's out there, what has been legally acceptable with other cities, how we can do it, how we can model some of that same behavior, and make sure we can do things in a legally permissible way. I'm definitely committed to seeing that through and want to see what we come up with.
Okay, thanks. The other thing I'd like to say, and this is just for Penn Live if you're listening, it would be great if before they ran a headline that indicated that you know, that we are asking for these things that aren't possible, that they did the research before they just posted, like made a headline and posted an article about it. Sorry, that's not for y'all there. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Coon. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Just one aside, I believe Erie, and I looked it up, their county went through a home rule charter and they have a county-wide city councilor system. Just as when we do comparisons, it's just, there's some differences.
Well, Erie City is a third-class city that has a mayor committee, mayor town council board. I mean, you're right in saying that the county itself is incorporated, but Erie City specifically, and that city specifically, a third-class city with a mayor council board, is doing the work and trying to implement a civilian review board that has subpoena power, independent investigatory power, and some sort of mechanism to hold police accountable.
Okay.
So I'm saying if they can do that as a third-class city, why can't we?
Sure. Now, and I wasn't disagreeing. It was just an aside, because sometimes when we look at these comparisons, there has to be district attorney's offices and things. So if they have that system, it's just something to consider. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
In a comparison.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, you got it. Thank you.
And just,
thank you for your
I'm sorry, one more thing I just saw too. I wanted to look it up too. If I'm correct in terms of dates and timelines, it looks like Erie is a similar place that we are in terms of reviewing it and legislation. So I don't think we've actually voted on anything yet as well.
No, that's true. But they are actually actively looking at those and consulting outside lawyers that are not attached to the city. Or, I mean, it's a city lawyer. The lawyer that they consulted is a DA in the city, but she's not connected to the city council or to the mayor in the way that a city solicitor would be.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hipland, for your comments.
Thank you.
It looks like we have 2 or 3 questions in the Q&A. And once again, please feel free to raise your hand if you have a comment or a question, or press *9 if you dialed in from the phone. So the first question we have is from Kay Green. And the question is, this is for each member of City Council for the CRB, which I believe is to stand for the Citizens Review Board. What timeline can City Council commit to ensure complaints are filed and reviewed in a timely manner by this board or council?
Really quick, Councilwoman Green, could you please have, unfortunately, we're having technical difficulties on the back end. Could you have Ms. Green please state her address for the record, please?
Ms. Green, if you could please type your address in so that we can put it on the record, or at least the part of the city you live in. She says she lives in Shipoke on Front Street. Thank you. So as far as the timeline for complaints to be filed, I believe me personally, I would have to have more information about the process itself and how long the process would normally take before I'd be able to commit to a timeline for them to be reviewed and resolved. I would think that within no more than a week of them being filed, they should be reviewed at, at some level. As far as being resolved or what the next steps will be, I would have to learn more about the timeline itself before I could commit to a specific timeline for that. I don't know if any other council members have any comments on that question.
Yeah, I'm just kind of riffing with that a little bit too. And Kay, I realize this may not be a complete answer to this, but I do feel that, once there is this group in this committee that has been established, that I think from even a self-governance standpoint, I would think that within the context of that, they would set some parameters on, number one, how they would review it, how they would submit and things like that. I'm just riffing that I would feel like that could be part of the development of this board to be able to look at that and make a determination on that too. That that's just something that we could, kind of put up for discussion as we discuss this.
I'm happy to chime in since it was for each. Yeah, it's tough to answer at this stage. I mean, largely what this board, what we're going to have to draft is their budget. I mean, the answer is as soon as possible and make the process as expedient as possible for the taxpayers. But I would need to know a little bit more about what staff capacity they would need to expedite the process as much as possible, because the budget's really going to dictate and how much the city can dictate towards this or put towards the board. But I mean, I would obviously want to work with the board to get them all the resources they would need to make the process as fast for taxpayers as possible.
All right, thank you to my fellow colleagues for helping answer that question. We have another question for Ms. Green. And the question is also, how will the results of any investigation become available to the public once investigations are completed? The answer to that would be that the committee would create a report, and the report would be presented to the city council and the mayor, and therefore it would be a public document that can be released. Obviously, it will be presented at a city council meeting, which is open to the public as well.
Josh, I saw something about home rule in there too. That was a question that Kate asked in the part of the queue. Did that one get answered online, or?
Someone queued it into a different part. Let me see. The question is, if home rule is what we need to get the changes in the city implemented through the city, through the community review board, then how do we get Harrisburg changed over to a home rule city instead of what we have now? I will let one of my colleagues that is more versed on the topic of home rule address that.
So this is Wes. According to the legislation that was passed for the city of Harrisburg to continue to have its taxing authority, one of the pieces of that was for Harrisburg to explore moving to a home rule charter. In order to establish that, there would have to first be a vote by council for us to say, hey, we're going to look to explore this. And I'm saying all this, and I know Neil's listening, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. At look to explore, if we are going to do that, there'll have to be a series of meetings to discuss that, a vote by council after that, and we would have to establish a board who I believe they have to be voted on by the public to sit on a board that would essentially create the rules for what home rule would look like in the city of Harrisburg. After they come up with their report, that report would then have to be sent to the voters for the voters to determine, hey, here's the report made by these members of the report development council. And then that report would go to the voters for review. After that, then the city would be looking at moving from our current form of government to a home rule. And I may be a little bit off, but I'm looking at Neil to see if he needs to correct anything that I said. I think I have some of the 30,000 foot view stuff encapsulated in my comments.
I think you've captured it pretty well. When that board is proposed, it goes on the public ballot along with a referendum itself. So the public votes, one, do we want to explore home rule? And then they vote for members of that commission.
Right.
Assign them to that task. And council is obligated at that point to put a budget to it. And then what that commission's on a timeline of about 9 months. And then they come back with their recommendation, and that goes back on the ballot.
Right.
So it's about a year and a half process. So
right.
And Neil, didn't council approve to do one of the first steps in terms of a study?
No.
Some years ago? Okay, I thought we did.
No, they explored the resolution, but they didn't vote on it. They had some public discussion on it, and there wasn't a decision to move forward to a referendum at that point.
I remember. Thank you.
I will note there's a piece of legislation pending that passed the state house that's now in front of the state Senate that would expedite that process some, but it hasn't had its first vote at the Senate yet.
Right. Yeah. And all the legislation that passed for Harrisburg was that we have to do it within the 5-year period that we were granted to continue the taxing authority. We're still within that right now.
All right, thank you. If anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to type them into the Q&A, or to raise your hand, or press *9 if you've dialed in order to raise your hand and be unmuted.
Just a follow-up question Kay had to home rule. I got kicked off, but if I saw this and was answered, I apologize. But no, there's probably no way to get that on the ballot for November. It's a several year process and takes several ballot initiatives to get done.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions or comments they'd like to make regarding Bill 8? Please feel free to dial *9 if you've dialed in, or to raise your hand if you're joining us via Zoom. We have one person with their hand raised, phone number ending in 993.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, hi. My name's Mike Alexander. I live at 1929 Market Street, and I have a couple of questions for you and Neil. First, there is a national organization called the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. It's an organization of all the civilian oversight boards across the country. The website is nacole.org, and I was wondering if anybody has looked into that resource.
No, I haven't. I don't know if any of my colleagues have or if Neil has, but I haven't looked into that specific resource.
Our office has reviewed their materials and, have sort of dove in with both feet on them, actually. So.
Oh, thank you. As a follow-up, cities of the third class belong to the Pennsylvania Municipal League. Has anybody contacted the Pennsylvania Municipal League and gotten any advice, information from them?
I've talked to a few people with the Pennsylvania Municipal League and just had some conversations with them regarding Bill 8, but I do plan on continuing to have dialogue with them. The main thing was to get comments from the citizens of Harrisburg.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Looks like we have a few questions in the Q&A. Once again, if anyone would like to make a comment or has a question, please feel free to dial *9 if you've dialed in, or raise your hand or type it in the Q&A. So Ms. Green has another question. What is the City Council stance on the role of the CRB, which would stand for the Citizens Review Board? What is City Council stance on the role the CRB should play in disciplining officers found guilty of misconduct, recommending discipline? If discipline is necessary, how will it be enforced? If there is a disagreement between a CRB recommendation and the police department, how does the City Council think it should be resolved? I think that's a very forward-thinking question that has a lot of parts. As far as the role that the CRB should play in the officer's misconduct or recommending discipline, that's something we would have to work around the current collective bargaining agreement because as of right now, that will be all handled by internal affairs. So what role they can play in it is something I'm not sure about. And I think that that's something that as we continue to craft this legislation will become more clear. But as of right now, the way the legislation is written, they wouldn't have a role in recommending discipline or being able to enforce discipline. That will be handled by the internal affairs in the police department. I don't know if anyone else has any comments on that. All right, we have another question.
I'm sorry, I was jumping in, I apologize. So, yeah, I think we really do have to spell it out by way of the legislation and make that clear in terms of what it will be. And that's me coming from putting my HR hat on things. It's saying that we have to build a process that's fair and equitable and feel that we believe in that and that we can commit to that process. And so that is, I think, the end result of all of these discussions and the legal analysis and things that we can do and make sure that what we do both is following in conjunction with what both the state and federal laws say that we can do, what the third class city charter allows us to do, and then building a process of which that we can commit to and that we can apply uniformly. And that's me using my HR hat and kind of putting those things out into the landscape with that. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Thanks, Ben. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on to the next question by, looks like the next question is by Amanda Arbor, who lives near 15th and Dairy Street. Thank you for holding another town hall. I have several questions. Has the city council given any additional consideration of posting of public documents on the website, the FOP contract, or etc.? Also, when is the current FOP contract up for renewal and when will negotiations start? And what kind of budget would a civilian review board require? So as far as when the FOP, or can we put the FOP contract online? I think that's something we can definitely do. And we will work towards getting up in the near future because it's a public document. It should be easily accessible. So we shouldn't have to go through the right to know request in order to get it. So we can get that posted onto the city website. I don't see any problem with that right now.
That's, and it's actually probably there somewhere. It's just the website's clunky. So.
And it actually is there because we had to pass it by way of legislation. And so all of our legislation is archived and online, so it's there.
And the contracts are on the controller's website. So there's.
So we can vow to make it more easily accessible since it is accessible, but not easily found. So we'll make it easily accessible. So that's something we will work on. As far as when the FOP contract is up for renewal and when will negotiations start, I believe Neil will be the one that can answer that one. I don't know when the negotiations would start.
So 2 parts, and I forgive me, but my memory's not perfect. It's either up December 31st, 2025 or December 21st, 2026. I don't remember which is the end year. Under collective bargaining, there's a notice that comes out. It has to come out 180 days before the expiration to commence bargaining. And sometimes it comes out earlier than that, but that's the deadline to commence for the notification to commence bargaining. And that's pretty typically followed. Contracts can be reopened from time to time, but it takes the agreement of both parties to do it. So, but as of right now, it would be 2025, I think would be the target when, from the expiration, when we'd end up in contract negotiations.
All right. And then what kind of budget would a civilian review board require? That's something we'd have to do some more digging into. I don't know that off the top of my head. I think it depends on what the role is and what powers they would have. Obviously, having subpoena powers or investigative powers, they would need a larger budget. That will probably require them to have outside counsel to ensure that there isn't a conflict with the city solicitor sitting on the board. They will probably need outside counsel if they have investigative powers. So I think that's relative depending on what powers they would end up with when the legislation is crafted. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in on that one. All right, we have another question from Ms. Green. Does the city have any role or input in the collective bargaining agreement? The administration takes part in the collective bargaining agreement. City council gets the collective bargaining agreement after it's already been negotiated and agreed upon, and that's when city council votes on it.
Which has been a point of contention with city council for some time.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that the union ratifies the contract. So by the time we get it, it's already been voted by the union. They've approved it and the administration signed off on it. So candidly, we're essentially a rubber stamp at that point.
All right, we have another question from Ms. Green. This question is to each member of council. What is your stance on the oversight of police? Do you think it is needed? I would like to hear an answer from each council member that is on this committee. So everyone who's joined us for the town hall. So my stance on police oversight, I believe that we do need police oversight. I believe that every police department needs some amount of oversight, just as everyone needs some amount of oversight. Each one of our departments need a certain amount of oversight to ensure that they're staying on task, that they're completing the task that they're supposed to be doing, that they're not overstepping their boundaries. And that's just in general. I believe that police need oversight, especially because they do have an accelerated amount of burden on them. They have lots of interactions with the public. And in order to make for sure that our public is being heard and not being over policed or feel that they're being brutalized in any way, we need to make sure we have the proper oversight of our police department. So that's my opinion. I don't know if anyone else would like to give their opinion.
Good evening, everyone. I absolutely believe that police oversight is necessary. I think that it is needed within our city. I also believe that a lot of the reforms that Governor Wolf recently signed will be helpful in moving our bill forward.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've mentioned this several times in the past too, that absolutely do I think that there needs to be more oversight. I have been troubled for some time in what I see as a lack of accountability that exists within law enforcement in the communities that they serve. And I kind of liken it to the fact that we are accountable to the people in our roles. We get elected every 4 years. Someone can come out and vote for us one way or the other, and continue to give us the job that we continue to seek. I think that I'd love to see what we can do at our level, but I am also mindful of what's happening both at the state level and what I would like to see happening at the federal level as well. I am hopeful that there is an administration change in November that will make this a priority at the federal level, that will help us out at the local level to be able to build in more accountability. For me, at the end of the day, anyone who works for a local government entity is accountable to the people that they serve. There's no exceptions to that. There is no ends if or buts to that. And in this, I think of most importance is public safety and how we interact and how we ensure that there is a more symbiotic working relationship within the communities that we serve.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, this is Wes here. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I concur with everyone that we do need additional accountability and oversight of the police, as was mentioned by other folks on this Zoom. The police are public servants, and we are all held accountable to the public that we serve. So there should be some additional accountability and oversight. There are things at the state, local, and national level that some changes that need to be made at all those different levels to ensure that we can have all the proper oversight that everyone is looking for. So we are going to work at our level to provide oversight over the police to the extent that we can. It's also incumbent upon all of us to work with our state representatives and Congress folks to push them on the accountability measures that they may need to change in order for us to get the reforms that we're seeking.
This is Dave Mattson, real quick. I don't want to belabor the point. A lot of my colleagues made them for me, but I do agree we should have some accountability and also believe that it's critical on those federal and state reforms. The state really and federal government need to give us the tools that we need in order to ensure there's some accountability and trust with the community and law enforcement. If we don't have trust between the community and law enforcement, we have a long road ahead of us. So we have to establish such trust. That also means mutual respect and that everybody knows their role, what they're supposed to do, and that they're held accountable to the standards. So.
All right, thank you. So I've got a couple more questions in the Q&A, but just as a reminder that if anyone has any questions, they can feel free to press *9 from their phone in order to raise their hand, or they can raise their hand via the Zoom app, or they can type it into the Q&A and we'll get your questions asked. So we've got another question from Ms. Green. Is there an ability for the city council or at least public safety committee to be involved earlier in the process of the collective bargaining agreement? I will leave that to Neil. I believe that we should be involved earlier in the collective bargaining process instead of just being involved at the end once it's already completed. But I will leave it up to Neil to explain if that is something that is a possibility.
We're under the Pennsylvania Labor Relations Act and Act 111, which are the two acts governing the bargaining process. And there are definitions out there that talk about unfair labor practices, and multiple spheres of negotiation are one of the ones that are unfair. The law isn't incredibly clear, frankly, in Pennsylvania, because most governing bodies are a mix of executive and legislative function, and Harrisburg's of the 2,200 municipalities is one of the few that has a split branch. So obviously many governing bodies are involved in negotiations because they also have the executive function of the municipality. So there's not clear guidance on it. And there'd have to be some very tough lines drawn to figure it out. But just like the mayor can't act as a legislature in Harrisburg, the council can't act as with executive functions. And so that's really what it comes down to. They oversee the contracts as an administrative executive function. Whether there's another process we could look at that supplements, so that sort of changes the order, I think that's something that we would have to look at our outside labor council to see if they have other proposed ways of doing it. But I will note that we didn't have outside labor council for most of these until we were in receivership back in 2010 and 11 and 12. And up to then they were negotiated internally at that point. So, you know, we evolved from where we were to where we are. We could look at whether there's another place to evolve, but we would have to do it in accordance with the Pennsylvania Labor Relations Act.
And I'll just reiterate, we've had discussions about this in the past. I've reiterated my position from a council perspective that I would like to see council representation involved in this process early on before we get something passed to council. So that's something I've maintained all along and will continue to maintain.
All right, thank you. We have another question from Ms. Green. This is to each member on tonight. It says, what is each member of the public committee's position on defunding the police and what does it mean to you? I'll once again start this off. So going by the current popular definition of defunding the police, which is to reallocate police funding, funding in the police budget to different social justice movements or just different parts of the city. In that case, I'm for defunding the police in the sense of reallocating some funding. And if we look at our current police budget, we see areas that are underspent, that we have money allocated to, such as personnel, that we're not able to spend the money currently. And so I would definitely be for finding different avenues to spend the money that would increase public safety in the city. So that's my opinion. I don't know if anyone else would like to give their comment on that.
Yeah, since it's each, as I understand, defund police, it doesn't mean abolish police. It means reallocating dollars from municipal budgets to anti-poverty programs, either housing, early education. So we have a lot of poverty in the city. Any and all opportunities that we can allocate more funding to address poverty issues such as housing, food insecurity, early education, I'm always all for that. I'm willing to look at not just police budgets, but any department's budgets. If there's some savings there that can go to those types of programs, particularly the housing piece, I'm all for that conversation. And we know a lot of crime is caused by poverty issues. When people's basic needs aren't being met, they get desperate for survival. And that's when you get antisocial behavior. And so if we can alleviate some of that struggle so we can avoid those problems down the road, I'm for that legislation and that type of policy work.
All right. If there's no one else, I'll move.
I'll jump in too. I've shared this, publicly before, and I'll share it again, that I like to make what I would say is data-informed decisions on how we allocate funding for things like public safety in any initiative across the city. And so, yes, I'd like to make sure that we are allocating funds to reflect the needs that this community has when it comes to, and I don't even want to use the term entirely public safety, because I think it's both community well-being, public outreach, social services, all of those things included. And I've asked before, and I will continue to ask, and I hope I get some data on this, but I want to see data on exactly the type of calls we respond to, what is the nature of those calls, what's the outcome of those calls, and see more data so I can make a data-informed decision when it comes to how we allocate both dollars and resources to the umbrella that essentially what we're talking about is public safety.
I'd like to respond before we move on. So, of course, I do not support completely abolishing the police budget because we need public safety officers. That's the bottom line. But if there are opportunities, say if we do not meet our full complement and there are funds left over, I would absolutely and always and forever support that those funds moving toward affordable housing efforts within the city and other social services. So not completely abolishing, because again, I don't really know how that model is working in other cities. I can't cite now, I don't know if Ms. Green, if you have any examples in your research or your group's research to note how successful completely defunding police departments in other cities similar to the city of Harrisburg is working. I would love to see the data, but until then, I don't support completely abolishing the budget or defunding the budget rather. But if there are opportunities, I would definitely support those.
And I guess since they've asked everybody to comment, I'll also comment. So as was stated earlier, I think defunding the police in the context that I understand it is reimagining public safety in communities. So can we look at the police budget, what percentage it is of our city budget, and if we do have additional funds left over, can we reallocate those in other areas to support the needs of our community? When it comes to that, absolutely. But in terms of Harrisburg, as Neil had mentioned, we have multi-jurisdictions over different parts of the way that we look at public safety and some of the social services networks that are in the city. Unlike some larger cities who may have their own Department of Human Services, we rely on the county. So there are some partnerships that I think we can create if the city doesn't have the capacity on its own to hire social workers and have them in a separate office in our org chart. Because also if we're going to be looking to potentially bring on social workers, we have to figure out where do they work within our or other crisis intervention folks, because the county does have a crisis intervention unit. And are we going to be looking just to hire folks for the city of Harrisburg? And if we are, we need to ensure that they're somewhere in our budget. They have their own organizational structure and what that would look, what that would be like on our city budget. So there's certain services that we can offer. So in terms of that, I'm all for exploring different ways that if the city can hire folks and we can do that on our own, great. If we need to partner with the county, I'm also supportive of that. So we want to make sure that we're providing the best public service that we can to the residents of Harrisburg.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. I'm going to move on to a caller who has their hand raised with the last 3 digits of 039.
Ms. Green, after this one, I have to, there's 2 comments that are in your answer section that actually have not been read yet. Unfortunately, we're learning this whole Zoom webinar chat situation, and it's a process. So there's 2 questions, one from Ralph that is in the answered section, Mr. Ralph Rodriguez, and then the other one is from someone named Pam, who I have asked her to please state her full name and address for the record once you get to her question. Just an FYI.
All right. Thanks, Shardan. All right, so the caller ending in 039. If it will allow me to unmute them.
If the caller can press *6 to unmute after they've been asked to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Okay, sorry about that. A couple of things. I wanted to mention that the issue of the police contract being on the city website, I did try to find it, and I couldn't. There was a link to it when I searched for it, but it was a dead link. It went nowhere. It went to a document that doesn't exist, and it really it never would have occurred to me to look on the controller's website, or in that section. The next thing about the funding issue, what I'm hearing is a lot about reallocation, and I'm really worried that that means whatever's left over. That's what we don't need, then we can put towards the social services, addressing poverty, housing, those kinds of needs. In addition to that not being a sustainable form of funding, I'm concerned about how that shows the priorities, that the police get the money first, and then whatever's left over goes back to the citizens. I think that needs to be turned right on its head, that poverty and citizens need to come first, and then the police can have their budget out of that. On the bill itself, the existence of a board, a commission, committee, the very existence of it posits that the issue of police violence and over-policing of Black communities is the result of individual police misconduct, and this is fundamentally misguided. The issues we face as a community are so much bigger than an individual officer or even group of officers. If we do not resolve and address the underlying racist roots of modern policing and the deep-set culture that reinforces escalation, it will not matter what powers a commission has. It will not matter what formal policies are on the books. The root causes will continue to feed the problem with no hope.
Oh, hello?
It seems like the caller dropped off.
We lost her.
We lost her? Okay.
All right, well, if she calls back in, we'll click her back on. In the meantime, we will answer some of the questions in the Q&A section. So Shardan, you said there were 2 questions that were missed, that were in the answered section. The first being Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez's question is, hello all and good evening. Thank you for the proper adjustments on the platform allotted to submit questions. I feel this is a much more welcoming effort. I just wanted to ask how each council member in attendance today feels about the potential board. Could it be valuable in their opinion? Also, playing devil's advocate, if the board is something that is unable to be hammered out as it once was, what is another suggestion of how to hold police accountable and that steps outside the proper procedures when apprehending an individual under the suspicion of committing a crime? So I'll take a stab at this question. It's a couple parts here. I do believe that this board would be helpful in holding our police accountable. I believe that the board would be helpful in increasing the relationship between our community and our police department and overall public safety of our city. As far as if this is something that is unattainable, if creating this commission is something that's unattainable, it's my hopes that we're going to get this worked out and we're going to get this done. So as far as what would happen if we were unable to do this, I think then it's back to the drawing board and we can look at other processes. But I haven't went that far yet because I am hopeful and dedicated to ensuring that we get this done. So if anyone else would like to take a stab at it, please feel free to.
Yeah, so I'll take a stab. Well, thanks for the question, Ralph. So, I think how we feel is, we're, personally, I know we had pushed for a civilian review board my first term on council. I'm all for the potential of us looking and exploring that. But, for me, I want to also balance the need to, we're taking this seriously. So we're very deliberative about how we're looking to address this. So for me, that's why we're looking to solicit as much input as we can, continue to do research on other types of boards and committees, and which one do we think is going to be the most effective for the city of Harrisburg. I want to remain optimistic as well that we'll be able to accomplish something in this term. We got commitment from the mayor at our town hall that he will sign whatever council sends to him. So as I said there, and I'll say again, it's incumbent upon us to do our research and ensure that we're working within all confines, that we stay within the law, but we work to find something that is going to be acceptable for our residents and that we're able to get done on behalf of the residents, so that we can continue to hold our police accountable and have some citizen oversight in that conversation as well. Oftentimes, even as members of council, we pushed to have some legislation passed, and we weren't able to get. And sometimes we even experience delays in getting information from the police. So we stand ready and willing to get something done on this. I don't want to think about another aspect. I want to think about whether this advisory committee and/or review board gets accomplished, and we're able to hammer out a good resolution.
I'd like to respond to. Good evening, Mr. Rodriguez. Thank you for your questions. So the first one, how do I feel about the potential board? I too am optimistic about this. I think that establishing a committee or a board, again, would provide our citizens with really some resolve. Now, do I think that this can be accomplished with the bill as drafted? No, I do think I would support some amendments to the bill that would, I believe, that would strengthen it to really ensure that we're all on the same page with balancing what we've heard throughout the public hearings that we're hosting, town halls, and those things that the council members feel would be imperative for a board or committee such as this. So I do think that it's needed, but as written, I just feel the bill could be strengthened.
Yeah, I want to just jump in and add that I agree wholeheartedly with Councilmember Bowers on that too. And I think I want to point out something even more than that, because I see some of the questions come in the queue talking about, like, we're reiterating time and time again the concept of what is accountability. And we have an opportunity, and we have struggled as this council in the past in terms of ensuring that we've maintained that accountability does exist between the administration and council when it comes to some of the things that we've been looking for, particularly when it comes to information coming out of whether it be public safety or any department. And we know that this has been a challenge. So I look at this opportunity to say, we have to get this right, because we have to show this community that accountability does exist and can exist and will exist. And I think that's something that I'm very committed to doing. So for me, it's not a question of, at this point saying, are we going to do it? It's a question, we're going to do it, at least from my perspective, and I want to do it right. And I want to make sure that we are infusing this, because we have to establish and maintain a government for the people in our community where they feel like it's responsive to the things that they are hearing, seeing, and feeling on the streets. And if we don't do that, then we're missing that opportunity. And I think we have strived to do that so far in so many other actions that we've taken, but this is such an important piece of that puzzle that we need to do it. And I know I'm personally committed to making sure that we can get this done right.
I agree with you, and I really think now is the time. I mean, not only do we want to get it right, I think we're all on the same page here. That's why we're here tonight again, and that's why we'll be here next week. But I think really now is the time to. It's the right time to implement this, and I know that we can do this if we just continue to work together and really hear each other. I know that it's not always going to be flowers and rosy, but we can agree to disagree, but we can ensure that the major pieces of this legislation we all agree on. I think we can get there.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. And sorry, I know there's other questions, but again, when we did this before, I think the point of contention became, working between the DA, our police department as well. So, I'm glad we're having these conversations. We're going to continue to work on making amendments to the legislation, as other folks have pointed out. I know a lot of the wording in here can be changed, and we can reframe how this is currently written. And I think, I think that is our intention. I can't speak to anybody's, but I know that there are going to be a lot of amendments offered when we come back. Right now we're just getting that input, but as Councilwoman Bowers pointed out, we can agree to disagree on certain points, but we're going to also have to have some uncomfortable conversations, as we're going to move forward with this when it comes to dealing with the police and the administration. And I'll continue to point out, and I'll say it until I'm blue in the face, the mayor said he'll sign whatever we send him. So, uncomfortable conversations and real conversations on the issues of policing in our communities are important. And one of the other comments made was about the policing in, Black and brown communities. Don't want to state the obvious, but, pretty melanin proficient over here. So, we do take all these issues seriously, and, we want to address them in the proper way. So we do hear everyone. We may not be, we're still gathering input. So I think everyone is, still not trying to, say where they're going to be one way or the other, but there's still a lot of great input that's coming in from our community, and I'll stop talking so we can get more of it. Thank you.
Thank you all. And as we talk about how now is the right time, it's the right time to make sure we have what we need in it and that it's what we want, because this opportunity is not going to just keep rolling around. So when we have the opportunity to really make a lasting impact, this piece of legislation is something that's supposed to last longer than any of us are ever going to be on council, and continue to evolve even as our children live on in the city. So that's the purpose of getting this input, of getting the public's opinion and taking the time with it instead of trying to rush something through. All right, so I'll move on to the next question from Pam Howard, lives on Susquehanna and Woodbine. I would like to ask what avenues are available for oversight of the Capitol Police during the protest May 30th. It seemed they were using pepper spray on people who were not involved in any violence. So Pam, we are not over the Capitol Police. As far as oversight over the Capitol Police, that's something we don't have control over. I would suggest that you reach out to Governor Wolf and ask him to have more oversight of the Capitol Police. We don't have the ability. We do coordinate with them and some events, especially events that are going to be on the Capitol property. We coordinate with them so that we can provide traffic control. And so maybe during that coordination, we can have some conversations beforehand on protocol that we'd like to see. But as far as oversight, we can't have actual oversight of the Capitol Police.
Yeah, and sorry, real quick, Chair Green, that oversight is with the Department of General Services within the Commonwealth government. So I know the Capitol Police have a number that you can reach out to them, but I believe it's the Department of General Services, which has oversight over the Capitol Police, and they have jurisdiction over the Capitol complex and any other property that is owned by the Commonwealth within the city of Harrisburg.
All right. Thanks, Wes. We have another question in the Q&A from Adam Brackhill. Adam, if you could let us know where you live in the city, it would be appreciated. Adam said, hello, does the city have any plans or thoughts on restructuring city taxes, more specifically the gross revenue versus net revenue for businesses? Businesses that may be having a tough time growing or starting still pay via gross revenue, especially with the time that they are and maybe what the city plan to restructure. So I can't answer that question, and it's not specific to Bill 8, which is the main discussion for tonight. I don't know if anyone would like to comment on that, but that's a question that I can't answer, and it's not really relevant to the main discussion that we're having tonight, which is supposed to be on Bill 8, which is the legislation to create a Citizens Law Enforcement Advisory Committee. So if anyone would like to comment on it, feel free. If not, we'll move on to the next question.
I can definitely comment on it really quickly. That is always a good discussion. It has been a long-standing issue that we are very limited in terms of actually where we collect revenue. It's very tax heavy. It's reliant on many different tax forms within the city. But one of the things that we will need to address, and that's something that has come up by the way of if we go the route of home rule or not, is how that will change. It is a long discussion, even beyond what we want to talk about tonight from a perspective, but it is an important concept to consider. Should we go down the route of home rule, because that's what changed the taxing entity, not really the base. Keep in mind, we're still the same base of people that we have to tax under, but it could change the way we tax that base. But it's a source of contention and a much longer conversation than I think what we have before us tonight.
Thanks, Ben. We have another question from the Q&A, and I'll just remind everyone, if they would like to verbalize their questions instead of them being read by me, please feel free to raise your hand or dial *9 from your phone. If not, you can feel free to type it into the Q&A. So we've got another question from Mr. Hicklin. If we are going to truly hold police accountable, it is critical that we see patterns of behavior If we are going to truly hold police accountable, it is critical that we see patterns of behaviors I'm encountered between police and civilians. Will the council members commit to giving the Civilian Review Board access to police encounters with residents so that data about patterns of complaints against officers can be compiled? I believe that as we move forward with the crafting of this legislation, we'll look to include different powers. If we can give powers that would allow them to see actual police encounters with residents, I'm not exactly sure what you're looking for when you say police encounters by residents, or is that like access to the police report itself? That's something we'll see if we're able to give to them. Neil might have more specifics if we're able to give access to like police records that would include the encounters and the patterns of the complaints. So if we're talking about the access to police complaints, that's one thing. If we're talking about police reports, that's another thing. So I'm not exactly sure what Mr. Hicklin's looking for in his answer. I don't know if Neil will be able to address it a little better.
Yeah, I can't tell what the inquirer is asking. I can't. It depends what records we're talking about.
He said specifically pertaining to complaints and consequences.
To complaints by the person encountered with the officer and consequences?
Yeah, I would interpret it that he's looking for information if we could get, if they would have access to complaints by civilians against police, and then what the results were after the complaints were filed, like the actual disposition of the investigation.
And I don't know, because this goes down to one of the things that one of the other panels had raised, that some of the stuff has confidentiality, as is the provisions of some of the other boards. And I will note, you already have an ordinance on complaints that is supposed to produce a report to City Council. And in conjunction with that, you may want to visit that question again in more detail. But off the top of my head, I don't know without really drilling down on how much of it would be reviewable. It would depend on whether there's a minor involved. It would depend on the same sort of list of things we talked about last week, whether it would be, whether it's part of an active criminal investigation, all of those things.
Well, as the bill is written, under powers and duties and the information gathering, it notes that under section 2-5159.1, that's information gathering, subsection C, that reports on law enforcement interactions with the public will be shared, and subsection D of that same section, citizen complaint summaries and reports. But again, I don't know to the extent, but they are noted under the information gathering section.
I think
Thank
the
you, Councilwoman
anticipation
Bowers.
is there are pieces that are public, but depending if it also has the parts in the legislation, or if there are pieces that are non-public information. And that's the tricky part.
Okay.
Yeah, right. And I know when we were meeting initially before the hiatus, I had requested and received a document regarding, I think all members of council may have received that document regarding the number of complaints. I don't recall to the extent of what information is public or not, if that is that whole document a public document, Neil? Do you know?
That document's a public document.
Okay, all right. So then I can just note for the record that what we received, and that was dated June 30, 2020. So this is information that we do receive. We're supposed to receive it on a quarterly basis, but just for the purposes of this meeting, that's neither here nor there right now. The document we received noted that there were a total of 10 investigations, 3 of which were the result of citizens' complaints, and all of those are investigated internally. So I think part of on the complaint side is also getting the folks to fill out the complaint forms, and I think we need to do a better job of making those maybe form fillable online. That we've been pushing to try to move some more stuff online as well. So there are certain aspects that are public documents, and I think I don't know if that's posted on the website, but there are a lot of issues that we need to resolve with IT issues, but that's a conversation for another day.
Thank you, guys. We have another question from Ms. Green. Since the answers given has been based upon what the current bill does and does not do, what amendments are the Public Safety Committee considering proposing to the current bill? As of right now, we're just listening to the public feedback, public comments, and then taking it all into account to see what we're able to do and how we can make this bill the most effective. As I noted before, some of the concerns brought up by citizens include not having subpoena powers, not having a statement of confidentiality so that they would be able to have subpoena powers, having the police commissioner on the board, having to do a ride along, or having to be part of a orientation or citizens police academy hosted by the police. So I think those are all things that are to be considered and making amendments. As of right now, I would say nothing's off the table and everything's open. We're just continuing to solicit feedback. As we hear more and more feedback, that's all applicable that can be put in as amendments. So that's my opinion. I don't know if anyone else but him.
No, I think it's absolutely correct. And I think the point that I want to drive home with regards to this is this whole format of doing a town hall style is really for us to listen and hear and gather input. And when we come back together after our summer hiatus is complete, we will have to bring this back up in a work session where I really think we workshop it. We look at the amendments that we want to make and fine tune this piece of legislation. So that's the end that we're trying to get to. But it is premature for, I think, any of us to say, yes, we want to commit to this, or yes, we want to commit to that. There's still another town hall, and we've been getting input all summer long from people in various forms, whether it be reaching out to us on the street, although I guess there's not many of us are on the street that often anymore right now, or like an email and phone calls and things like that too. And we're all committed to the process and making sure that we've been able to solicit as much feedback as possible to inform us in the best approach to take as we turn this into something that we agreed to pass.
Thanks, Ben. Anyone else before we go to the next question?
Just real quick. I think one of the other main issues we heard at the last couple of town halls was the reframing of how the board as currently written is more centered on and trying to prove community police relations rather than an accountability aspect to it. I know additionally, one conversation that I've had with a few folks is about how folks are appointed, and are we going to look at ensuring that each policing district has representation on the advisory committee and or review board, whatever the final form looks like. So those amongst a host of other issues and more issues that I'm sure will come from this town hall and the next one.
Thanks, Wes. Another question from the Q&A from Brent Liscombe. It says, would council be willing to publicly take a position with the community expressing consensus of defunding the police? I believe that's a question that we all already went through and gave our opinions on defunding the police. So I'll say that one's already been answered. We have another question from Amanda Arbor. As we are talking about increasing police accountability in the future, we also have the current reality that there are things in the police department is already mandated to do, i.e. responses to civilian complaints that is filed or provide use of force reports to city council that haven't been complied with. What can we do both now and in the future to ensure that the police are actually being held accountable in reality to what exists on paper? I will say that the main thing we can do as city council is to continue to follow up, continue to demand it. And, you know, when it's time for budgeting, to make for sure that, you know, we have been getting everything that we've requested, everything that's been put on paper that's, you know, supposed to be being given to us. So I'd say those are some of the main ways we can start to enforce it now. I don't know if anyone else has any opinions on that question.
Yeah, I think we've talked a little bit about that already tonight in general in some of our responses.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's, you know, working with the police to ensure that they do follow the letter of the ordinances that pass, and additionally committing to publicly requesting that information until we get it. And then we also need to work on our IT infrastructure, which, you know, I think we all know, to ensure that these documents that are public documents can be made available online. So, you know, we did that. We made requests over and over again, finally got a report on June 30, and I believe if we're going to get it quarterly, the next one will be due at the end of September.
Right. Thank you. We've got another question from Ms. Green. Since there has been said time and time again that the proposed council can't have subpoena powers, independent investigative powers, can't have any type of oversight over the police, what does each member believe is the point of this proposed committee or potential board? Does each member of council think that having a powerless committee is good for the people of Harrisburg? What tangible things would the committee be able to do? I think this is what the people want to know. So as the legislation is currently written, the board would still have access to all public records, and they would be able to review things, produce reports, bring council's attention to maybe certain trends that they may be seeing. So as we've discussed throughout the night, as far as subpoena powers, independent investigative powers, oversight powers, those are all things that we're still working to see if they are available. We've gotten some different feedback from our solicitor that kind of tells us some things that might not be available, but it's our job as council to do our due diligence to make for sure what can be given and what can't be given, and to make sure this board has as much power as possible to get the job done that the citizens of Harrisburg are looking to get done. So I won't just automatically say, no, they can't have any of those powers. I think that's something that we are in the process of still working through. So if anyone else has any opinion on that, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, we've heard a lot around that subject, and I don't believe any of us have weighed in one way or the other on that too. And I think we all want to seek out exactly what our allowances under the law will be, and make sure that we have the best interpretation of the law available and accessible to us to be able to do this. And we will definitely be looking at what other communities, particularly in PA, are doing when it comes to this, because this is not a unique discussion just to our community. So I would say that we have not weighed in on that one way or the other. We are looking at all aspects of this, And nothing is off the table at this point that we want to take under advisement and consideration until we get the best advice from a legal perspective we can in the context of being a third-class city.
Yeah, I just want to add that, for me, I want to wait and see what the state ends up doing with legislation reform and see what that allows municipalities to do, and also engage our lobbyists to see what other pending bills or legislation may be out there before making a final determination.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question by Carol. Carol, if you could provide the area of the city that you live in, that would be appreciated, so it can be read in the record. The question is, I've been trying to get streetlights on my block fixed for several months. Every time I call, I am told I am on a list. There are no working streetlights on my block. It is literally pitch black. Is anyone working on streetlights? I live inner city in a fairly high crime area. How can we get some help? Please advise who I should call. I have been diverted to other phone numbers by the city operator, but I never get a call back. So I will give you my phone number, Carol. You can feel free to call me and I will do what I can to get those fixed as soon as possible. So my cell phone number is 717-623-8412. Feel free to give me a call or a text. Let me know the block so that I can get someone out there. I'm sure there are other council members on here that feel the same way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If we find out, hi, Carol, I'm Wes Majors. I'm the chair of the Public Works Committee. So, Asha does public safety. I do public works, who also works with city engineer and some of the lights. So if we can find out, what block of the city you're on, we can also do some outreach and see, what potentially is the holdup.
All right, we'll move on to the next question here. I'll also remind everyone that if they would like to verbalize their question themselves, they can press *9 from their phone or press the raise hand button in Zoom in order to raise their hand and have themselves unmuted. They can also type it into the Q&A and I will be more than happy to read it out loud for you. We have a question from Jane Buckwat from Market Street. And Jane said, after the third meeting, how will the public safety chair proceed? After the third town hall meeting, the next week we'll be going back into our session coming out of hiatus. This bill will continue to be in committee. We'll have some public discussion in committee as well as discussion with council members. And we'll work on getting amendments done so that we can get this bill crafted into its finest form. In the meantime, we'll also continue to do research to see what powers are available to this committee that we can give this committee so they can do their best work. We'll work with the city solicitor as well as do as much research, reaching out to other organizations as possible. So those are the next steps after the town hall meetings are completed. Sorry, I have to find the next question here. So we've got another question from Ms. Green. The question is, to what extent of openness to public scrutiny council members would like to see in the board? Example, to the extent to which hearings, decisions, and other deliberations are open to the public and or media. I don't think it's specifically spelled out in this bill, but most of our committees and boards are open to the public. So I would see that this board would have meetings that are open to the public and would do most of its work in the public eye under the Sunshine Law. So.
Yeah, and if it's set up as a commission or board under the city, it would have to be. All of our boards and commissions are subject to the same scrutiny that we are actually essentially.
We have another question, a question from Adam Brackbill. Will the city's police force and volunteer members meet regularly to discuss issues, praises, and update each other? The purpose of this bill is supposed to be, one of the purposes is to increase some of the police and public communication. So in this bill, the police commissioner, as it's crafted now, would sit on the board, so there would automatically be some of that discussion, and the board can invite the police officers to their meetings at any time. They'll be open to the public. So the hopes is to increase that communication and share best practices or things they could see improvement on. We've got another question from Ms. Green. Will board members commit to limiting members of the review board to civilians rather than appointing any police to the board? If you look in the bill as it's written right now, it does not allow for any member of the administration or any what are they called, employee of the city of Harrisburg to be on the board, except for the two who are non-voting members, being the chair of public safety and the chief of police. So it's written in the bill right now that it would not allow anyone other than civilians to be appointed to the board. We have another question from, if this person could please state their name and the area of the city they live. This question currently is from someone named Pixu3A, which I believe is just the name of their phone. And the question is, how does the bill address the root cause of police violence? Please explain exactly how the committee will improve public safety. So right now, the committee would bring attention to different problems and issues with policing in the city through the use of data and reports. So they would use public information, which includes body camera footage, dash camera footage. They would get reports on police complaints throughout the city so they can follow different trends, have access to different data, and they will make that that information public and bring it to the attention of the citizens of the city as well as city council members. So that's their main power right now. So I don't know if anyone else wants to butt in on that or add anything to it.
Yeah, one thing I'll add is I think as we move forward, diversity in recruitment is critical, and investing in future police officers that are homegrown from our community, I think would be a big asset to avoiding future conflicts. So as we have these discussions, I definitely want to do some proactive measures with engaging our youth and having them want to pursue law enforcement as a career option at some point. So I know we do some of that, but I'd like to do a deeper dive at some point and really look at how we can expand that.
Thank you. We have another question in the Q&A. How will citizens be involved in any amendments that the Public Safety Committee will propose to Bill 8? And that's by Ms. Green. You're being a part of the process right now. So the point of these town halls is to really solicit feedback, get points of contention, questions, concerns, and really craft those into amendments to the bill itself. So this is being a part of the process now. Also, our workshop meetings are all open to the public. We take public comments during those as well. So as we propose amendments, you can be directly involved in that process right then by making comments on the amendments, whether you agree or disagree, or if it was something you'd like to see specifically added. So this is all a public process. Nothing happens behind closed doors. So you can be a part of the process from beginning to end.
And I just want to add, in terms of just exactly how this happens within council, is that any council member has the ability to propose an amendment that they can put forth. And so they would make a motion for an amendment. In many cases, the committee chair will often be the one that will make all the amendments that people have brought up, but it doesn't have to be that way. So any sitting council member can propose an amendment. They will make a motion for that amendment. That amendment would need a second, and then the amendment would be brought onto the floor essentially. And then there could be some discussion about that amendment, questions, answers. And then that amendment specifically would have to be voted on by the entire body within council. And it would have to be a majority vote for that amendment to be put into with the legislation. So it would subsequently change that legislation at that point in time. So that's procedurally how that would occur.
Yeah, and I think, Chair Green, I think so. We won't be looking to offer just, I guess, I know one of the questions was about, time frame, right, wise. So our first meeting back is August 25th, which I believe will likely be a readout of our, how our town halls went. Our first work session will be probably the first Tuesday in September.
which is the first.
Right. So we typically don't, no, we can discuss potential, no, we can amend in committee, right? We can amend it and we have to all, we can amend it in committee, right? So we can amend it at the workshop.
But it still has to be read into record then.
Has to be read into record then at our legislative session. So yeah, there's some time. And as other council members pointed out, any of us can offer amendments. I think all of us have shown a willingness to work with members of our community on potential amendments. So, working with us on some language at these meetings will be great. And then we'll just have to get it into a amendment form, either on our own or working with the solicitor's office.
Thank you both. And then just for the record, Pixel 3A is Caitlin McDonald of Bellevue Park. And if anyone else has any questions or comments, please feel free to dial *9 from your phone or press the raise hand feature or type it into the Q&A. We still have about a half an hour left in our town hall, so feel free to ask any questions, get any clarification, or just make a comment on the legislation. And once again, that's dial *9 from your phone or press the raise hand feature or type your question into the Q&A. All right, we have another question, this one from Pamela Parson. If police have failed to make every single yearly required report to the city council once between the years of 1984 to 2016 and quarterly now, what power does this bill actually give to compel the police to actually follow any recommendations they might make? And how does this actually change the conditions? I think that just by having these public discussions, bringing things to the forefront, by increasing the conversation around it, you increase accountability naturally. Having someone or a committee there that's monitoring whether these reports were done, whether they were turned in, requesting information. I think that alone will create some more accountability and charge the police to act faster and respond a little faster. So that's just my opinion. I don't know if anyone else has any opinion on it.
I mean, this has been brought up a number of times. And I kind of want to reiterate, like, kind of a process that takes. I think people are very hung up on the bill as it is written now. There was it was very important for us to get something introduced prior to us going on hiatus so we could set the stage for us to use this format this summer to be able to workshop and look at the legislation. So I want to reiterate that the bill as it stands today does not have to be nor needs to be reflective of what we pass at the end of the day. And that's an important piece for everyone here to understand because that's why we're doing what we're doing now. That is our goal and our hope that because the community participation is so important to this bill and to the success of this bill, we need to take this time to do it.
Thanks, Ben. Does anyone else have any questions or comments on Bill 8 that they would like to discuss tonight? If so, please type it in the Q&A or press *9 from your phone or press the raise hand in order to have yourself unmuted. All right, it's looking like we don't really have any more questions for tonight. We'll begin to wrap it up if we can't get any more questions. I think that we had a pretty good turnout tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming out and participating. Remind everyone that we do have a town hall scheduled for next Tuesday, which is August 18th, and that will be held at Reservoir Park. It will be an in-person town hall, so you can come out, state your questions or comments, solicit feedback. We'll try to make sure we have copies of the actual legislation there so that you can pick up a paper copy of the legislation. If you pick up a paper copy, we ask that you do keep it because we're trying not to spread germs, so don't pass it around. If you pick it up, keep it for yourself. And then, you know, we're here just trying to get the public feedback, public comment, just to get everyone's involvement in this process. So as my colleagues have stated earlier, this isn't an end all be all. This is part of the process of us trying to ensure we craft a legislation that's representative of the city of Harrisburg and what the citizens are looking for. So what's been proposed and introduced, I think it's pretty obvious is not going to be our final form as we work to recraft it and redesign it to incorporate a lot of these comments that we've been receiving so far. So we thank everybody for their comments. Feel free to submit comments in writing to our email address. Chardin, could you tell them our email address that we're soliciting public comments at if they'd like to email a comment beforehand?
Sure, that is public comment. It is not plural, so it's just comment. So public comment at Harrisburg spelled out pa.gov. Public comment at harrisburgpa.gov.
And that's all one word, right, Chardin? Public comment is all one word.
Correct, yes. There's no spaces, there's no dots. It's just public comment at Harrisburg, again spelled out, pa.gov. And there is no space or dot between the Harrisburg or the PA.
All right, thank you, Chardin. And so if you've got a comment or a question that you weren't able to ask tonight, feel free to email it to us. If you have any comments that you'd like to ask as we're still here, please feel free to state your comment or ask your question. And then just a reminder, we are having another town hall next Tuesday from 6 to 8 p.m. at Reservoir Park. It looks like we have another question that's come in from Pamela Parson. And the question, I have a follow-up question for Councilperson Madsen regarding getting local folks to become police officers. How do you consider the possibility that young people no longer want to be police officers because they see policing as an arm of white supremacy?
Well, was there any in addition to the question?
No, that was it.
Yeah, I think that's it's a very fair criticism is that we have a whole generation that are going to look at law enforcement as racist or against them, and we have to address that. That's as a nation and as our community here locally. How do we establish? And that's what this conversation is all about. How do we reestablish trust between the community and law enforcement? More importantly, see that our youth trust law enforcement and are inspired at some point to even take a career in it. That's a long, long road ahead of us to make that happen. And what I'm hoping is in addition to this legislation, we can continue to have the conversation to invest in substantive ways to have our youth engage with law enforcement and see it as a career pathway and not a racist institution that's suppressing them, which I fear is the interpretation that they have now. So it's going to take us a long time to reestablish that trust. I think we can get there, but it is a long road and it's a fair concern. But I do believe with good substantive community policing and engaging our youth, we can get there and have hopefully more youth want to be part of law enforcement in a reform period.
Thanks, Dave. And then also for the record, Ms. Parson lives on Holly Street in Harrisburg. All right, so if we don't have any more questions, as I said before, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. If any of my council members have any comments or anything they'd like to get to voice before we close this session out for tonight, please feel free to go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you, Councilwoman Green, Chair of the Public Safety Committee, for hosting another, I think, a successful town hall meeting virtually. I look forward to next week's in-person meeting, and thank you for making the accommodations for people to ask their questions live via Zoom. It seemed like that worked well this week, so thank you for making that accommodation.
Thanks, Councilwoman Bowers. They definitely seem to like the Q&A feature.
Yes, I also want to echo that. Thank you, for spearheading this for all of us. The time and the effort involved on your part is valuable and important, and you've been a very good MC for the last 2 sessions. So thank you for your willingness and ability to manage the question queue and things like that too. So thanks for all you do for that.
Yeah, I'll also say to Chair Green, thank you. We've had 2 of these so far and we'll be hosting a third. my question, I guess, should the weather not cooperate next Tuesday, do we have a a plan if it were to rain? Are we going to look to Zoom? I don't know about indoor locations, especially with COVID, but I know since the community is requesting an in-person meeting, I think oftentimes those are a little bit, we can have a little bit more dialogue at those. These are great, but nothing like being able to talk to folks. I guess mask to mask. But, what would be the what's the I guess if we do run into inclement weather, what's the plan?
So we'll be monitoring the weather. If need be, it can be held via Zoom. I also talked to Dave Baker about being able to hold it in another location. And his suggestion was the pavilion at Reservoir Park that can be opened up because of the barn style doors and still allow for proper ventilation and spacing. I know I did receive the text from Councilwoman Bowers about holding at the Public Works building. And there were some concerns. I spoke with Public Works and Dave Baker with some concerns about bringing large amounts of the public into where we have our city workers at and making sure that we keep them safe as well. So it can be held via Zoom. If we have enough notice, we can move it to the pavilion so that we can still have it in person.
Great. And then, just because I have the QA up, Ms. Parson, from Holly Street had another question about something that, we had talked about at the last meeting, but I don't know if it's been addressed. And I think this is also a larger issue for us as a city about translation services or having the language, the bill available in Spanish, or if there's going to be a translator available next week.
So I spoke with Moment about it. We weren't able to get it accomplished for this week. With it being a virtual platform, it actually makes it a little harder for us to use the language interpretation software that we use if someone will call into 311, which is done over the phone. So we're looking to see if we're able to provide that service next week and have translation in Spanish and seeing how we can logistically work that out. All right, so if we don't have any other questions, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for coming out. I'd like to say thank you to my council members for being here to support me and to support the citizens of Harrisburg as we field questions and just try to make sure that we get all the input and take everyone's comments into consideration. Thanks to our communications manager, Moman, for helping set all this up, because if it wasn't for him, there would be no Zoom. Thank you to Chardin for helping host this and for Kirk helping host it last week. And just thank you to Neil for coming out, taking some time to answer some of these legal questions that we have. And I look forward to seeing everybody next week, hopefully in person.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.